Very good evening to all. Today we will be discussing regarding the role of nuclear medicine in pediatric urology. So, the radionuclide studies are widely used presently to evaluate various pediatric urological conditions. And the key point is that serial assessments are necessary to keep the children on follow up and to decide the proper management protocol for the patients. So, it helps in deciding the type of intervention also for a particular urological pathology. The main principles behind the nuclear medicine study in case of a pediatric urology patient is that we use a radiopharmaceutical combination in which a drug which is specific to a particular organ is used, and it is stacked along with a radionuclide for conducting the study. And we take serial follow-through imaging in a specific sequence to assess the same. And the basic parameters which we assess in a pediatric urology patient is one is functional and the other one is an anatomical. So either you can assess the function of the kidneys, or else you look for any anatomical blockage as such to assess an obstructive or a non-obstructive system. Presently the radiopharmaceuticals which are used are one is a DTPA and the other one is MAC3, EC and DMSA. These are the four main pharmaceuticals which we use in pediatric urology. And DTPA is diethyl triamine pentaacetic acid, and MAC3 is mercapo-acetyl triglycine, and EC, as we all know, it is ethylene dicysteine, and DMS is dimercaptosuccinic acid. So all these are pharmaceuticals which are specific to kidney or to the collecting system. And to assess the function or to assess the obstructive pattern, we tag it along with the radionuclide so that it will show up in the gamma camera or SPECT-CT imaging. And the radionuclide which we use to tag it in case of a pediatric urology patient is a technetium-99. So you label TTP or MAC3 or EC or DMSA along with technetium-99, and you see for the excretion pattern or uptake pattern, and you take that image using a gamma camera or a SPECT-CT.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
Just 1 second.
Yes, sir.
Two small corrections is very important. Basically, it is not technetium 99. It is technetium 99M.
M. Okay,
Okay.
sir.
M stands for metastable, and that is a radioisotope. Technetium 99 is technetium 99M decays to technetium 99.
Sir.
Okay.
Yes.
So technetium 99M is the radionuclide, and it is not radionucleotide. It is radionuclide. Nucleotide
Okay,
is the DNA. I mean ribonucleic acid. Nuclide is the physics. One is physics, one is biology.
Understood.
So,
yes, sir. So the radiopharmaceuticals which we use are one is DTPA. DTPA is excreted or it is filtered by the glomerulus. So it is basically used for assessing the glomerular filtration. And other agents like EC and MAC3 are tubular agents. That is, they are secreted by tubular secretion, and they are used for assessing any obstructive pathologies. But in order to assess the cortical anatomy, we use a cortically retained agent, that is DMSA. And when compared to the normal studies which you do for the patients like MCUs and other X-rays, the radiation risk in case of a nuclear medicine study is relatively low, and it accounts for almost less than 70% of the annual natural environmental radiation which we get during 1 year. Now coming to the renal cortical scintigraphy, the renal cortical scintigraphy based on DMSA relies on the uptake of DMSA by proximal tubular cells, and in turn it is dependent on the renal blood flow. The focal renal blood flow is usually decreased in sites of acute pyelonephritis, so it corresponds as a photopenic effect when we take the films by using a gamma camera. And the main use of DMSA in our setting is basically to see for any residual scars after an attack of upper urinary tract infection. And it also helps in determining the intervention for such patients who are having vesicular reflex. So if the child is on prophylaxis and if the child is having progressive scars or with recurrent UTI infections and child is having progressive scars on serial DMSA scans, then that shows that you will have to intervene, you will have to do an intervention for the child rather than doing an observation for the same. And sensitivity and specificity for the same is like noted to have around 87 and 100% respectively for detecting acute pyelonephritis. The timing of DMSA scan is also very important, because you don't do a DMSA scan when the child is having an acute inflammation or an infection, because it will alter your finding because of the increased since the kidney will be inflamed and it will be edematous, and the blood flow will be affected. So if you are suspecting an acute pyelonephritis, you can go ahead with the DMSA scan. But for assessing the scars after an infection, it is always better that you wait for a particular amount of time and then do the DMSA scan. Ideally, for the initial 4 to 5, it will take almost 4 to 5 months for the acute changes to resolve completely. So if you want to assess for the scars, whatever lesion or whatever photopenic lesions are persisting after the initial 5 months time, that you can account as a scar. And another doubtful thing which you will have in mind is how to differentiate between a pyelonephritic fossa and a scar. So this has been discussed here. This is the DMSA scan picture, and if you see for the if you see the pictures labeled as A on the left side of the screen, you see that the reniform architecture of the kidney is lost. It is lost and it is not maintained. And in the second picture, you can see for a concavity on the outer surface of the kidney. So this happens when there is a scar. The outline of the kidney itself is changed, and there is a concave defect on the outer surface of the kidney, which is seen as a photopenic defect. So this is how a scar presents in a DMSA scan. And the B imaging on the right side of your screen shows photopenic effects on the polar region, but the reniform architecture of the kidney as such, it is maintained.
Shall I intervene?
Yes, sir.
as
Yes,
and
sir.
when required, or
Yes, sir.
end of the presentation?
No, sir. You can intervene in between, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so can you go to the previous slide?
Yes, sir.
So timing of DMSA scan in acute infection or chronic scar. So when do you advise for a DMSA scan in an acute setting? In a practical clinical setting, do you advise?
Sir, 3 weeks time.
No, what I'm asking is a child with UTI presents to you.
Sir, for assessing scars, we'll do it after 3 to 5 months time.
Now, what will be the initial workup when a child presents to you with first episode of UTI?
Yes, sir.
What will you do? What investigations are you going to do?
Sir, first episode of UTI, we will not go ahead with any other investigation. We'll just treat the UTI and send the child home. But and we'll do an ultrasound. But if the child is having dilatation of the proximal system, we'll keep on follow up. And if child is having recurrent episodes of UTI, then we will evaluate for the same, sir. With MCU.
Okay, recurrent UTI, what will you do?
Sir, we'll once the UTI is cleared, we'll go ahead with an MCU, sir.
Yeah, there. That's what I was about to come to. See, now there are two ways. See, the child presents with the pediatrician. They go on managing conservatively, treat every episode, and then they will refer for a MCU after many episodes.
Yes.
Okay. Now there is something called a top-down approach.
Yes.
If not in first episode of UTI, but at least after second episode of UTI, they say you get a DMSA scan. If DMSA scan is normal, then whether to do MCU or not again is a debatable entity. Whether we can follow up again after some time, or if it's a male baby and if the ultrasound, the collecting system is not dilated, then you can wait and watch for some more time.
Yes, sir.
But if the DMSA scan is abnormal, then you go with MCU.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that is called a top-down approach.
Yes, sir.
So in top-down approach, this timing is not. It becomes a hazy entity.
Understood, sir.
Okay, in top-down
Yes,
approach, if not in the first episode of UTI, but in the second episode
Second
of
episode.
UTI, they say you first get a DMSA scan. If DMSA scan is normal, even if you do a VUR, the chances of high-grade VUR are less common.
Yes, sir.
So usually we have grade 2 VUR, and in grade 1, grade 2 VURs, chances, whether to do antibiotic prophylaxis or not is again another debatable entity. So what they say is, and if you advise MCU straight away, many parents so they are in such situations they say it is top-down approach. You first get a DMSA scan. If DMSA scan is normal, wait and watch. If DMSA scan is abnormal, immediately you go ahead with the MCU. And
MCU.
okay, and next slide. So in next slide, if you see the first image, the renal contour is maintained
Okay, sir.
laterally.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but it's photopenia.
Yes, sir.
The uptake in the interpolar cortex, if you see, the contour is maintained, but the uptake is reduced. So
Yes,
this
sir.
is a feature of pyelonephritis. Even in the B image, if you see upper pole and lower pole, the contour is maintained, but there is reduced uptake.
Yes, sir.
In the follow-up, the second image, if you see, it has developed into a scar, but the fourth image, the pyelonephritis has resolved.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that is how you differentiate between a pyelonephritis and a scar.
Scar. Yes, sir.
Yeah, next.
Sir, in scar, the reniform appearance will be maintained or it will not be maintained?
It depends
It will be
where is
lost.
the
No?
scar.
Yes, sir.
No, it depends where is the scar.
Where
So
is
if the scar is at upper pole or lower pole, then reniform shape is blunted.
plundered? Yes, sir.
Okay, in the lateral pole, the reniform shape is maintained, but the contour is defective.
Yes, sir.
So one is shape, another one is contour.
Contour. Okay, sir.
If
Yes,
the
sir.
contour is maintained, then it is probably pyelonephritis. If the contour is lost, then it is a scar.
Understood, sir. Yes. Coming to diuretic scintigraphy, diuretic scintigraphy is a gold standard to differentiate obstructive and non-obstructive hydronephrosis and hydroureter. Any variation in the technique in which we do can always give rise to a misleading result, and it can alter the management also, especially when they are in the borderline function group, especially when the function comes around 35 to 40%, and any change in the normal technique can give misleading results, and it can alter the management of the child also. Basically, there are three elements for a diuretic scintigraphy. One is you ensure a proper hydration and ensure a proper bladder drainage, especially in cases where you're suspecting VUJO, and based on the timing of the diuretic administration. Uh, the globular agents which we use for a diuretic renogram is DTPA, but the role of DTPA in pediatric age group is questionable, because basically it is used only in pediatric age group mainly for transplant evaluations, and in adult age group it is used for GFR calculation. And the tubular agents which we use for a diuretic renogram is MAC3 and EC. In our setup, usually EC is a widely available tubular agent, and they are used to assess the outflow obstruction. And the question about which agent is the ideal agent to be used, that is EC versus MAC3 versus DTPA. Presently, DTPA is outdated, and the agents which you use are EC and MAC3. And when both are filtered using tubular secretion, but EC has got some advantages over MAC3, because the renal extraction of EC when compared to MAC3 is more. It comes around 70%, and MAC3 comes around 60%. So especially when the renal function is impaired, and if you are suspecting a bilateral pathology, and whether there is compromised renal function, always it is better that you go ahead with EC rather than going ahead with MAC3. Coming
Can
to
I
the tech,
add that?
yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you go to the previous slide, see for even transplant evaluation, EC only is better. See,
Yes.
transplant evaluation of the donor, like donor evaluation, DTPA is used basically to calculate GFR. But if the transplant evaluation, transplant kidney function evaluation, EC only is better. And two more advantages of EC is EC is exclusively handled by the kidney.
Sir.
Like even and there is no alternative of excretion. Whereas in MAC3, there is 60% renal expression, 40% can be cleared by liver. So if there is a global impaired renal, then the alternative route of excretion through the hepatobiliary takes precedence, and pediatric, I mean, the activity may be delayed in the optimal gastric activity. So maximum is useful only when you are doing scan for 20-25 minutes or maximum 1 hour. More than 1 hour, some amount of gut activity will come, and it is very difficult to comment on the delayed images.
Sir.
Therefore, I don't recommend MAC3 at all.
Yes,
And another thing, we see infection fraction more than 90%, not 70%. It is more than 90%.
90%. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Coming to the technicalities, one is that before the procedure itself, we need to ensure that the child is hydrated well, because it affects the renal blood flow, and in turn it can affect the result of the EC scan or the diuretic renographic scan. So uh, this will affect the, I will come to that slide later. And so one is that we will have to ensure proper hydration of the child before starting the procedure. Then next thing is the timing of the diuretic therapy as such. So diuretic, the timing of the furosemide is mainly given when the dilated collection system is filled to the maximum. Then the timing of the diuretic therapy and the timing is actually institution specific. Various protocols are used which involves F+20, F0 and F-15 protocol. That is initially after giving the technician labeled radionuclide, the diuretic is given at the 20 seconds or immediately before giving radionuclide, or 15 seconds before giving the radionuclide. That is F-15 protocol. And comparing all these three, F0 protocols are having reliable results, and it much less experience is needed when compared to the F-15 and F+20 protocols. And only drawback is that sometimes it might be difficult to interpret in case of slow filling capacious systems. Then next important thing is drawing the region of interest. Usually the ROA is drawn during the diuretic phase, and when you are expecting an obstructive system, ideally the collecting system plus or minus the ureter should be involved in the ROA. And next important step is calculating the voiding and also calculation of the residual activity. So once you give the dye and once it has crossed the collecting system, then you make the child stand up and then wait for 5 minutes for the voiding pattern to come, and then you measure the drainage pattern in the late films. And the differential renal function, the washout curves, and the half-life time are all computer generated. So basically this is one EC scan film. The main parameters which we assess in the film are: the upper one is the perfusion film, which shows the perfusion of both the kidneys, and the lower graph is the excretion film, which shows the pattern of the excretion from the collecting systems of both kidneys. And the image on the left side shows the outline of the kidneys, that is the region of the interest which is drawn. And if you see the main things which you need to see in the initial perfusion graph is that the black one is the aortic curve. So to start off with, the counts will be more high, it will be higher in the aorta, because once you give the dye through the cannula, it will go into the circulation. So maximum amount will be seen in the aorta. So to start off with, the aortic graph will be starting from a higher count, and slowly it will drop down. And the red and the dotted line shows the counts in the kidneys, the left and the right kidneys respectively. So initially, to start off with, the count will be low, and slowly when it is getting absorbed from the aorta into the renal vessels and into the renal parenchyma, the peak starts increasing. The hydration part is important because the initial upslope will be delayed when the hydration of the child is poor. So the peak, the time to achieve the peak will be affected when the hydration is poor. And coming to the excretion graph or the excretion films, ideally you say that the hydration is adequate and the renal function is good if we see the kidneys in the first 1 to 2 minutes time. In this film you can see that the kidneys are shown up in the this is 1 minute per frame. So in the first film and second film you can clearly make out the renal parenchyma. So it means that the renal function is the renal perfusion is actually good. And next thing is another thing to identify the proper hydration is there or not is that the bladder should be usually seen. If there is an adequate hydration, the bladder will be usually seen in the third to the fourth film. In the fourth film, you can make out the bladder outline. So it shows that the patient was well hydrated before starting the scan. Then other pattern which we need to see is how the excretory graph is going. So coming to the downward graph, you see that the marking between the 2 and 3 seconds shows the cortical transit time. If you see the film also, you can make out that the cortical transit time is normal, because the radionuclide is reaching into the pelvis by the almost by the third and the fourth plates. So initially you assess the excretory pattern here in the graph. The dotted line shows the left kidney, and the normal the red line shows the right kidney graph. And if you assess the right kidney graph, you can see that it is slowly peaking up, and after that it is going up rather than going down. And when you compare it with the left kidney, initially after that initial cortical transit time, the left kidney graph is showing a downward trend, which is a normal excretion which is happening, and the right kidney is showing an upward trend. So that means that there is some obstructive pattern happening. And when you come back to the excretory films, you can see that there is significant holdup of dye in the pelvis and also in the ureter. The ureter is prominent in the sixth and seventh film, and after that also it is remaining prominent. It is not getting excreted properly into the bladder. And if you compare the early static and also the delayed static images, you can see the prominent ureter and the holdup of dye in the collecting system as such on the right side. So it shows that there is some holdup of dye, and there is holdup of dye, and there is obstructive pattern in the vesicoureteric junction. So it is basically a right VUJO with a 28% split function.
Can I add on?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. See, the top two rows is perfusion phase.
Yes, sir.
And the bottom three phases are parenchymal as well as excretory phase.
Sir.
Okay. And first 1 to 2 minutes images is to see whether the injection has been done properly and whether the perfusion is good.
Sir.
For as far as hydration is to be assessed, the bladder activity when it is seen will give the information about hydration status.
Sir.
The first 1 minute image and second minute image is to see whether the injection is good or whether the perfusion is good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And in the graph, the first graph you said was good. One is aortic curve and other one to the renal curves. Whereas in the second graph, the two lines what we show is the interval at which the split function is calculated.
Sir.
Second and third minute.
Yes.
So it can be varied at 1.5 to 2.5 minutes and 1 to 2 minutes or 2 to 3 minutes like that. Basically, whenever there is peak activity, that time you have to calculate the split function. But this is machine dependent and we may not be able to alter it. So what we practically do, we do visual assessment and calculate the renal function.
Yes, sir. Sir.
So other activities to be seen for 4 minutes. And then there is a progressive accumulation, and if the child passes urine in between, you can see bladder getting empty. There will be a hump in the renogram curve, and bladder getting sized. There again, that activity will give information whether it is being drained or not. Because many times, despite catheterization in a supine position, drainage is adequate.
Understood, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, then. And again, another important thing, by default, renal image is assessed from posterior view. Like your left is upper left is left kidney, and our right is right kidney.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that is also very important.
Yes.
Posteriorly and anteriorly, there will attenuation happen because of the depth of the abdominal viscera and all. So normally we assess posterior view. So therefore, left is left and right is right. But unless I say whether it is posterior or anterior view, it may be very difficult for clinicians to say whether it is anterior or posterior. Anterior views we use whenever there is a horseshoe kidney, whenever there is an ectopic kidney, a cross-fused ectopic kidney like that, or pelvic kidney. So in such cases, we have to assess anterior images.
Sir. Yes, sir. This is another EC scan, which is we can see the perfusion graph and the excretion graph and the region of interest on the left and the right side. The perfusion graph looks like moderately okay. The aortic graph is coming down, and slowly the renal graphs are crossing the aortic graph. And when you see the excretion pattern, the kidneys are seen in the first plate itself. This is 45 seconds per frame, and the first frames itself, the kidneys are outlined, and the bladder activity is seen by the fourth plate. And if you see the excretion graph in this, uh, you can see that after the initial peak, both of the graphs are going down itself. But if you see the excretion graph, there is some hold up of the dye in the pelvis as such. And in this case, you will be doubtful whether there is any obstruction or not. But the graph wise, it is not showing a proper obstruction pattern. It is anyway going down rather than going up. So there is some clearance happening, and this in this cases, the role of the delayed images comes. So if you see the early static and the delayed image, you can see that there is some hold up when compared to the early images. In the early static image, there is some more excretion, and if you see the delayed image, this is the importance of the delayed image in such cases when there is doubt. You can see that there is a washout of the dye when compared to the early static, and there is washout of the dye in the delayed images. So which gives a split function of around 45%. And in such cases, we can always keep the child on follow up and observe with serial ultrasound and EC scans. So this is how you interpret the EC scans. And the most important thing when you consider the interpretation of EC scan is that it is never based on a single parameter. You will have to consider multiple parameters and then assess the graph as a whole. If you stick to a single parameter, there is always high chance that you can there can be misleading results, and it can in turn lead to improper management of the child. Role of hydration we have already discussed. It's always important that you maintain an adequate hydration prior to the scan. Otherwise, the results can get altered because parenchymal clearance will be decreased, and there is increase in the excretion slope. And I already mentioned how to assess the adequacy of the hydration through the EC scan. And next important thing which you need to consider when you do any renal excretion scintigraphy is the effect of the bladder drainage. This is more important when you are considering a patient, when you are suspecting vesicoureteric junction obstruction in a patient, and also when you are suspecting coexisting obstructive pathology along with a reflexive pathology, especially when there is a vesicoureteric reflux and when there is an coexisting obstructive pathology. It is always better that you send the child in a catheterized manner towards a scan center. I'll tell you why it is important, because see, if you see the scan if you see the scan with VUJO, you know that the ureter enters at the trigone level. So it is if the bladder is well distended, the distal portion of the ureter will be always behind that of the bladder. So some amount of bladder activity which is coming from the normally functioning kidney, the technician label dye will be coming into the bladder, and it will be overlapping over the ureter. So the reading will get affected because the background activity will be addition of the bladder activity plus that of the ureter. So if there is hold up if there is some minimal hold up of the dye in the VUJ part, and if the child is having a borderline obstruction, this is very important, because unless and until you negate that bladder activity part, if it is coming as a borderline obstruction, and if you don't empty the bladder, it will give you a wrong impression that there is more obstruction, and this in turn will lead you to take the child for a particular intervention rather than waiting for some more time. So if you catheterize it and then assess the VUJ obstruction properly, sometimes function will be much better after catheterization. So and whenever you are suspecting an obstructive pathology at the vesicoureteric junction level, it is always better that you do the scan after catheterizing the child. And also when you are suspecting in a reflux also, it is better that you negate the reflux part to assess obstructive pathology in a better manner. Now coming to the major pitfalls which can happen when you are doing the diuretic scintigraphy. And the most important thing is the region of interest placement. So this has to be placed in a proper manner, otherwise it can lead on to overestimation or underestimation. And errors in background subtraction is also very important. Ideally, when you are considering the position of the kidneys, especially on the left side, the spleen will be coming into the background. So if you are taking background activity from that renal fossa region, it can lead on to wrong results. So it will be always better that you calculate the background activity from the lower part or the lower lumbar regions or the iliac fossa regions, where only that it will be a homogeneous background activity seen on both sides. So ideally you should calculate the background activity from that particular place rather than going for the proper renal fossa region, where the splenic background also can alter your findings. Then the glomerular versus tubular regions we have already discussed. Another confusing area can be Dettel's crisis. That is, whenever there is an aberrant vessel crossing across pelvis causing intermittent hydrocephalus, intermittent hydronephrosis. In that case, whenever the best thing to do is whenever the patient comes to you with symptoms of pain, that is the best time to do the EC or the diuretic renography scan, because that time the child will be having obstruction. But once that pain resolves, it means that intermittent obstruction has resolved and the pelvis will be less dilated, and it can in turn give you wrong results. So whether to do an intervention or not, or whether to identify that, hydronephrosis part, you should ideally do the diuretic renography whenever the child presents you with pain. So that is the ideal time to do a diuretic renography when you're suspecting Dettel's crisis. So this is a renography which shows Dettel's crisis, which can alter the report. You can see the persistence of the dye in the delayed images. So in all these cases, we'll have to go ahead with whenever the Dettel's crisis is suspected. If you see the initial graph, the first graph in the upper part, you can see that there is no significant holdup of the dye, and both the excretory graphs are showing a downward trend. So there is no excretion. But for the same child, when the EC scan was done, when the child presented with symptoms or when child presented with pain, you can see that the dotted graph, that is the left kidney, is showing an obstructive pattern. It is an upgoing curve. So there is holdup of the dye in the delayed images also in the pelvis. So that shows that there is intermittent obstruction happening in this case. So in such cases, you will have to again evaluate the child with a CT angio, which will show the apparent vessel in the lower pole region or the pelvis region. Coming to the next modality, that is radionuclide cystography. It has got a greater sensitivity and lower radiation risk when we compare it to a normal MCU which we do in our hospital setting. And the advantage when compared to a normal MCU is that in normal MCU which we do here, we take static images. But in case of a radionuclide cystography, you can do a continuous measurement. So you know that the reflex is a dynamic pathology. So it is always better that you evaluate the reflex with a continuous measurement rather than going for static images. Now, when compared to the normal MCU which you do here, the radionuclide cystography lacks an anatomical resolution of the collecting system and urethra. And it is non-physiological measurement also, because we are catheterizing the patient and doing it in a retrograde manner, and the procedure requires catheterization. But this is not a direct study. There is another entity called indirect study also, especially when you are doing the radionuclide renography scans. Initially, after the cortical clearance, or when the dye comes into the pelvis and comes out into the bladder, and once it is excreted completely into the bladder, after that film onwards, you can again assess with gamma cameras whether there is any reflex happening or not. So that is indirect study. But when compared to the direct study which you do, it is not as sensitive when compared to the direct method. And the radionuclide which you use are mainly technician labeled pertechnetate or sulfur colloid. Coming to radionucleide testicular scanning, this has been there since 1970, and it is mainly used for testicular torsion and to evaluate between testicular torsion versus other inflammatory conditions of the testis, especially when child comes to you with acute scrotal pain, where you are doubtful whether it is due to torsion or acute epididymo orchitis. So, technician antenna pertechnetate is used here, and dynamic and static gamma camera images are seen, and these are concentrated at the pelvis region, and the photopenic areas shows areas of poor blood flow, and those are suggestive of torsion in the testicular region. And photon hyperdense areas are areas which are suggestive of more blood flow, and it shows that there is an active inflammation going on in that particular region. And it has got high sensitivity and specificity ranging up to 100%. It is always better than USG in an acute setting where you cannot differentiate whether it is due to torsion or due to acute inflammation happening in the supraintestinal structures. Coming to the cons of the radionuclide testicular scanning, one is availability issues. It will not be widely available as that of USG. Second thing is radiation risk, but though it will be minimal when compared to USG, there is always mild radiation risk. And second thing is the invasiveness of the procedure. We'll have to instill the dye and then take the scans. Coming to the role of radionuclide imaging in congenital anomalies, especially it is useful when you are suspecting renal ectopia versus a renal hypoplasia or renal agenesis, and also for the evaluation of horseshoe kidney. And it is helpful in evaluating the functioning tissue in the isthmus and also to assess whether there is an obstructive pattern as such from the horseshoe kidney. And it is also helpful in evaluating renal duplication. In that case, the function of each moiety can be individually assessed. The role of EC scan and MAC3 in uretropelvic junction obstruction has already been discussed in the previous slides. Another important is role of radionuclide cystogram in UT to detect the reflex. And antegrade cystogram is always as good as a retrograde studies, and always avoid bladder, or it also avoids bladder overfilling too. That is the antegrade studies. And as I mentioned earlier, monitoring is always constant, which has got an advantage over fluoroscopy studies. And technetium 99 labeled DMSS scan are also used to assess pyelonephrotic foci in case of upper urinary tract infections. And when you use a SPECT CT, the size and multiplicity of the lesion is also identified in a better manner. Coming to the role of nuclear medicine in assessing renal trauma, in an acute setting also to assess whether renal vascularity is maintained or not, a DMSS SPECT scanning can be done to assess the degree of the functional impairment, and also the sensitivity is extremely high and comparable to that of CT, and it is superior to that of ultrasound and intravenous pyelogram. And another area where we can make use of renal cortical scans is in case of renal artery stenosis. And DMSS SPECT is always better than planar imaging to assess for segmental stenosis of the renal arteries. Thank you. Hello, sir.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it's good.
Yes.
If you have any questions, you can ask me.
Questions, sir? Any like any specific conditions or any specific sittings or any specific clinical conditions where we will go ahead with F-15 protocol or F plus 20 protocol instead of F0 protocol?
The F20 is not needed at all.
Okay.
Say F0 is equally good, and what you told, the progressive accumulation or capacious systems, that is also not, I mean, doesn't affect in our day-to-day practice.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So F0 is good because the peak diuretic effect and the peak effect of peak accumulation in the pelvic system usually is 5 to 10 minutes after tracer injection. And in a F0 protocol, both of them are concordant. Like peak diuretic effect of fusamate and peak accumulation, they are concordant. And F plus 20, the disadvantage is the scan acquisition time is very much prolonged. It is almost double.
Yes, sir.
In a normal diuretic scan, the total scan acquisition time is 16 to 20 minutes. If you are doing F plus 15 or F plus 20, after giving the lashes, again you have to acquire for 10 minutes. So
Understood.
it becomes 30 to 40 minutes to study, and the kids usually are not cooperative.
Yes, sir.
They start crying, moving around, they come out of the field of view, and all those disadvantages are there. And double prick has to be done, or you have to put IV cannula beforehand. So these are all practical problems with a F plus 15 or F plus 20 protocols.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Minus 15, theoretically, they said it is better in a redundant collecting system or a capacious system. But in my practical experience, it is not All that great. So what I do, so the only usage of F16 protocol is in post situation. So to differentiate between a redundant collecting system versus recurrent obstruction, so F16 was previously used, but now I have modified it. Like I make it a image, and I do, if there is a hold up persistent, then I give another injection at 1 hour delayed image.
Yes, sir.
And what I have seen, post pyroclastic redundant collecting system usually drains after the repeat last injection. Whereas a recurrent PUJ obstruction, there will be significant hold up.
Yes, sir.
This is not described in any textbooks, but it is my practical experience. So I will say it is F plus 60 protocol.
Okay, sir.
Okay. But it is not textbook, but it is differentiated recurrent PUJ obstruction versus redundant collection. For exams, if somebody asks me what usage of F-15 protocol, you can say it is useful in post pilot.
Hello, sir. Sir, voice breakup was there, sir. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
See, in your exams, if some examiner asks what is the specific situation where you will ask for F-15 protocol,
Yes, sir.
then post pyloplasty cases, you can answer that as one of the indications.
Okay, sir.